it's important that we talk about these new insights, because if you think about the old insights, they sort of had a huge gap between what practitioners are doing and what academics are doing. These changing insights, and this is research that is evolving over time, align the interests of academics and industry much closer. So we start wondering about the same issues. How do you forecast markets? And we're no longer wondering whether markets are forecastable. So how do people form expectations, and how can we use these type of expectations to improve our ways of forecasting? Are there better ways to measure risk? Because maybe we're measuring it the wrong way. And when to diversify and when not. So let me move back to those three foundations. Three foundations. The first one I want to touch on is financial markets are unpredictable. Now let me, to start, give you the academic point of view. Basically, the academic point of view is that investors study financial markets and stocks so carefully that if they have any information, this information through their trading will become reflected in prices pretty easily. And if there's any information out there that will give investors an advantage, they'll use it. So if you have a look and think about in greed we trust, as it says over here, that might very well sum it up. So market, in an efficient market, prices reflect all the available information. Now, if you think about it, if all available information is reflected in prices, and new information comes out, prices will respond immediately. But new information, what is new information? Well, new information is information that's by definition unpredictable, otherwise it wouldn't be new. So what you see is that a lot of unpredictable information comes to the market and makes prices move unpredictably, follow a random walk. And the second point to note about this notion of market efficiency is that prices are not only prices, but they also contain information. Because the ultimate price is the best forecast of what investors expect about the future. And we'll get back to that point later on. So prices contain important information. Now, before I start questioning this efficient market hypothesis, as it's sometimes called, let me first argue a little bit in why it is such a very strong hypothesis. To give you a couple of examples, and we take this one first. What I've done here is I've plotted two markets, an average year in a financial market. What you'll see is two lines, a blue one and a red one, over 1 year. An arbitrary market, 260 trading days. The one thing is that one of these markets is real, and the other one is a fake. I created it. So the interesting question, but given the amount of people here, is I won't really ask you to put your hands up, but what I ask all of our audiences is, could you tell me which one is real and which one is fake? You may take your pick. But in all these years, I've asked this question to quite a few audiences. And I've only heard one person ever tell me why it needed to be the blue line, to be the real one. And most of the time, 50% of the people get it right and 50% of the people get it wrong. And the only reason why this person would see that is this little dip here. This little dip here I could generate if I took a little bit more advanced simulator, but in fact, that is pretty hard to generate. Now the interesting thing, if you see those things, in a way they look alike in sort of the same pattern, is that the one I generated is completely random. There is no structure, even though our eyes have a tendency to see structure in these plots. In fact, what people have tried is to see whether experts can tell them apart, and many technical analysts that are so-called experts in the history of financial markets can't tell fake from real. Now, another very simple example which I like to use is the monkey versus analyst versus markets. And imagine, if financial markets are unpredictable, you might as well take a monkey and have this monkey monkey throw darts at the financial pages and select the stocks that the monkey selects and hold that portfolio. So what the Wall Street Journal in the 80s decided to do was actually do this competition. They invited top analysts from all over the world to pick stocks every month. And they also threw darts at the financial pages. It wasn't a monkey, it was a blindfolded journalist. And they selected that portfolio as well. And what they found is that in the beginning there was quite a bit of change going on, but pretty soon you'll see that the monkeys, the analysts didn't perform extremely well compared to the monkeys. Only 40% of the time were they able to be, their forecasts were better than those of the monkey. Now 60% may not sound like much, but if you look at it a little bit more carefully, you'll see that it is actually pretty good. However, compared to the market itself, they still did perform quite poorly. Slightly over 50%. Now, this was sort of a confirmation of this notion of market efficiency. Because this confirmation of market efficiency said, okay, this is what you would expect. The financial markets are difficult to predict. The more worrying thing about this whole competition never attracted much attention, but what always surprised me is that the analysts that were invited to take part were extremely proud to be part of this competition and to compare their skills with the skills of a monkey. And that is kind of a worrying thought, because I don't know any other profession where that would be seen as a fair competition. So maybe there's something to this notion of market efficiency. Now, in the early 80s and 90s, few cracks appeared in this notion of market efficiency. We found weird results. Some people found that, for instance, in January, stocks had a tendency to perform better than other months, and we didn't know why. And this shouldn't be according to the hypothesis, because why should January be special? It would make the financial markets to some extent predictable. Small stocks perform better even after correcting for the fact that they are more risky, and particularly in January. So that was a strange phenomenon as well. Somehow January turned out to be a good month. There were other effects, the turn of the month effect. The end of the turn of the month tend to be a relatively good period for financial markets. And more and more of these type effects showed up. The thing was that the general academic view was to brush these under the carpet. These were simply exceptions to the rules. And somehow we would come up with an explanation why that was. So let me take you now to where I started working on my PhD. And that was in the early 90s. And laptops started to look slightly better. And I set off with this idea, is there a way to predict financial markets better? Can we actually predict something? Can we beat the monkey, basically? And what I would like to do to you today is discuss a couple of examples and talk a little bit about two of papers, studies that I've done, but also about some of the studies that other people have done. So I'll talk about seasonal anomalies, and I'll talk about gradual information diffusion. And thinking about market efficiency, it may be good to think about why markets might not always be efficient, why there might be, what would be situations where we could find some predictability. So before we look at these anomalies. So in current academic thinking, there's two main reasons why markets may not always be efficient. First of all, if market efficiency assumes some form of rationality, and it doesn't assume a very strong form of rationality, but it does assume some form of rationality. But even if not all investors are rational, markets can still be efficient, as long as investors are not systematically irrational. If investors can be systematically irrational, then we might see deviations from market efficiency. So, systematic irrationality you can think about of sentiments or human traits like overreaction, all the behavior that we systematically show. Now, unsystematic irrationality doesn't matter. And think about it this way: if I would take a large stone in this room and we would attach a lot of ropes to this stone, and we ask you all to start pulling irrational in any direction you like, what probably would happen is that the stone will more or less stay in the same place. Now, if some of you have some systematic irrationality, if there's a trade that makes us all go for the door, the stone will actually move. So then we can get a deviation from price and value. Because in an efficient market, price and value should be the same thing. So systematic irrationality may matter. And seasonal investing has been considered as one of those phenomena. Now, seasonal investing, this is one of my favorite quotes by Mark Twain. This quote by Mark Twain inspired me to look at one seasonal effect. And this one seasonal effect I would like to have a look at, discuss with you today is the Halloween effect, or sell in May and go away. And the sell in May effect is inspired by a very simple market wisdom. In financial markets, particularly in England, every time when May comes around, the newspapers start reporting this market wisdom: sell in May and go away, but remember to come back in September. In the US, they don't know this market indicator, but they have something similar. They know what they call the Halloween indicator. And the Halloween indicator tells you not to get back in September, but in November. End of October and Halloween. So, one of the first studies I did was with a student of mine, Sven Baumann. And we decided to test this very simple market wisdom. And this is a very simple test. So basically we're asking, the question is, are summer returns and winter returns different from each other? We separated the year in two parts and started testing this phenomenon. And what we found amazed us. Here you see the results. What we have here are the results for quite a few countries. This is the 18 developed markets, considered developed markets at the time. And what you see is here the returns, and the blue bars indicate the returns during winter, from November through April, and the red bars indicate the average returns over the period 1970 to 1998 for the summer period. This is the average returns over almost 30 years in all these markets. And what you see here is that the difference is huge. The country here is Italy, and in Italy, returns on average over this period in summer have been negative at about 2 or 3%. And all money is made basically during the winter period. This difference is not only statistically significant, which we academics like to think about, but it's economically very significant as well. And you can trade on this phenomenon. In fact, I can tell you I have been trading on this phenomenon ever since we discovered it. Just to illustrate how well you would do if you would pursue a strategy like this, and this is the most extreme example because I'm looking at Italy here, but just to indicate how well you could do trading on this strategy in the past, is looking at the returns of a buy and hold strategy compared to if you had followed this Halloween strategy. So your returns would have been substantially better. We published this study in 2002. Our data ran to 1998. And we got a lot of criticism in terms of people. What people would say is, yes, but if there is such a very simple trading strategy, then people will start trading on it and it will disappear. Of course, we couldn't argue against it because we didn't have any future data. So it was very hard to disprove that argument. Fortunately, we now have these future data available. So in some follow-up studies, I actually considered whether this phenomenon is still around. So what I'll show you next is from this period 1998 to 2010, what has happened. And this is 2010 because we published a study at that date. So what you see is that, if anything, the effect has only gotten stronger over time. So still, investing only in the winter will give you higher returns in almost all these countries. Now, I show you all these countries, you're probably wondering, would this happen in Malaysia as well? So, in fact, what happened was that people started sort of saying, well, you're looking at only these 18 countries, and maybe at a specific time period, maybe this is something simply of the recent past. So what we did with a PhD student of mine, Thierry Zeng, was we decided to go all the way. We looked at all the historical financial stock market data available for all countries in the world. Now, mind you, in some cases for the UK, we have data going back to 1692. So we had over 400 years of data. Not for all countries, but for the US it goes back around 300 years and so on. We took every data point that we could get and we tested again. And Malaysia was one of those countries in those study. And what we found from Malaysia is that if you look at the Malaysian total return index, including dividends, and we have these data available for Malaysia from January, at the time, from January 1974 to 2011, on average during May-October you would have lost 2%. And in November through April, the average return would have been 7.4%. So the same phenomenon seems to be present in the Malaysian markets as well. And as an academic, we would like to see the results statistically significant, and in this case, it is. So how would you have performed in the more recent times? So this maybe the Asian crisis played an important role here, because the Asian crisis took place during summer. So what I do here, in the next slide, is I compare the returns starting in December 99. And I would look at a trading strategy where I compare if you only had invested during summer, if you had followed this buy and hold strategy, and if you had invested during this, using this Halloween strategy. And please note that it doesn't include the last year, so it stops somewhere in May of this year. So, but we all know what happened in the last couple of months. So this phenomenon is known as now known as the Salivea effect or the Halloween effect. We don't know what causes this effect. Some people argue that it is sort of irrational, systematic irrationality that we have. They call it might be based on a seasonal affective disorder. There's many countries in the world, and I've lived in Scotland for a year, and there you see this effect happening more and more, see the effect happening very strongly, is that there's a huge shift in daylight. If you're now in Scotland, it will get light around 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning, and it will get dark at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So people get depressed, and some people have argued that this depression, this SAD, the seasonal affective disorder syndrome, might be related to stock market prices. Others have argued that it may be temperature, that if you have the changes in temperature maybe influence people's behavior. I must say I'm skeptic about these two explanations. The one I find most likely is a vacation explanation. If you go to places in Europe, you'll see that people take their vacations very seriously. And this phenomenon is strongest in Europe. So somehow I think that vacations may be driving this effect. In fact, if you go back in history, you'll see that the first time it was announced in the newspaper, and the first announcement was in 1935, it's already linked to vacation behavior. So this is the explanation I believe to be most likely. However, we have to keep in mind that it's very hard to separate these causes. We simply don't know. And the main reason is that all these explanations are highly correlated. If you look at all these time series of these effects, changes in temperature, vacation behavior, or the seasonal affective disorder syndrome, these tend to be highly correlated. So it's very hard to distinguish between these three explanations. In fact, if you would take a data series like ice cream production, Ice cream production is highly seasonal as well. If you try to explain stock market returns using ice cream production, you'll find the same effect. There's a highly significant relation. Of course, we all know that that doesn't make any sense. So it's very hard to figure out what is actually causing this. This is one example of a seasonal anomaly. The other way we might be able to predict financial market returns is very popular these days. It's a very recent strand in the academic literature. And market efficiency assumes that all investors have access to all information all the time. The problem is that you might say, well, in this world with internet, that should be almost true. But if you think about it, you might start to wonder. Some information is costly. Some information, some people might not buy certain information and others may. Also, some information may reach some investors sooner than other investors. On top of that, we are sort of bounded. We can't simply consume all the information out there. We have to restrict ourselves to what is most important for what we try to analyze. So if you look at investors, investors will sometimes focus on the information that is most important for the stocks that they follow. Information may be ambiguous. Sometimes information may mean different things to different people. So, in all these cases, there may be some predictability. And this is what the gradual information diffusion literature looks at. We also call it cross-asset return predictability, because what we do is we try to predict assets using some information from other assets. Let me give you an example about the intuition of these type of predictions. Suppose that you're an oil price analyst, an oil share analyst. You follow the oil industry very closely. What happens to oil prices will immediately have an impact on the oil shares. So you very carefully watch the oil price as an oil industry analyst. Now, if you're a bank analyst, you'll probably focus more on interest rates, because interest rates are crucially important for financial institutions, so that will be your main focus. What the idea of the intuition behind gradual information diffusion is that if you might be able to, because the bank analyst might not look at the oil price, and the oil analyst might not focus on the interest rates, or that may only happen with a delay. So what the intuition is that maybe you can use oil price changes to predict bank shares, and the other way around. There might be some information in the interest rate that might help you to predict where the oil shares are going. So, if you remember, I told you that financial prices are information. So what you look at is that these oil prices, and these oil prices contain information, the best forecast about the future. So if these change, that may have an impact for bank shares in the future as well. Now, the first evidence of these findings was a paper by Lowe and McKinley in the Journal of Finance in 1980. What they found, and again I think this is intuitively appealing, they found that big firms immediately responded to new information. So it was very hard to predict what big firms would do. That's not surprising, because big firms are in the broader index, and a lot of people watch what happens to the index and trade the index. Secondly, big firms tend to be followed by many analysts. So if there's any new information that will affect these big firms, these analysts would immediately jump on it, and these traders would as well. So big firms would immediately respond. However, if you think about it, small firms are followed by fewer analysts and might respond somehow with a delay. And that was exactly what they found. So for this presentation and for the book, what I decided to do is see whether that result would have disappeared, or whether it might still be present in more recent times. So I did a sort of a follow-up study on their study, and I did it internationally. And the question I asked myself, is it the case that big firms still lead these small firms? Can I forecast the small firms, if big firms go up in 1 month, can I predict what will happen to a small firm in the next month? So This you can test nowadays, and if you're a die-hard investment person with some content skills with regression like this, which I just give for completeness, but this is a very simple test you can easily do. And what I did is I did it for all these different countries here, and we found a very strong effect. Roughly the effect of a stock market change in the big firms works its way for 20% in the small firms in the next months. Again, these results are statistically significant, and we can explain quite a bit of the variation of those small firms using the information in the big firms. And 20% means, as an indication, that if stock market returns go up, let's say, by 10%, the big firms, you can, on average, expect the smaller firms to go up 2% in the next month. Again, something you might be able to trade on. How about Malaysia? Can we forecast the returns of small firms in this month using the big firms in the previous month? So what I did is I took the KLSE index, and what I found is that, just to give you an idea, the same results basically hold. If the market index goes up with 10% this month, you would expect, on average, the small caps to go up with 2% next month in the Malaysian market. Again, a statistically significant result. So, this is the first study and this effect that Lowe and McKinley did, and what we see is even years after this result still seems to hold. So there may be this notion of gradual information diffusion around. There's many more studies, and I'll just illustrate one from which is very intuitively appealing as well if you're from Europe. What you see happening in Europe is that Europe sometimes doesn't seem to have a mind of its own. It seems to follow the US to a large extent. So what these authors wondered about Bach-Strauss and Zhao in the Journal of Finance is, can we predict where other markets are going, assuming that the US is the most informationally efficient market? Is the US leading some of these other markets in Europe? And they found a pretty strong effect of a similar magnitude. Here you see what is happening. Around 20% works its way through the US market, works its way through the other markets in the next month. Coming back to oil. You look at oil prices, you might expect something similar to happen. Oil prices have an impact on inflation, they have an impact on the economy. So, as I told you before, you might expect that if oil prices change, this will have an immediate impact on oil industry stock shares. However, there may be a sort of delayed effect in terms of increased inflation. And this increased inflation may be picked up later by the market. Now, if that is the case, then you would expect oil prices to predict the broader stock markets. Now, if you think about oil prices a little bit more, you'll see that oil prices, you might consider this the ultimate market efficiency test. Because everyone can observe oil prices. If there's one bit of information that everyone sees, it is the oil price. It's freely available on a daily basis, in a real-time basis. So, and oil is crucially important for the economy. So if markets are efficient, you would expect it to be reflected in stock market prices. So here's a quote from Alman, showing the importance. But maybe what makes the point even better is even George Bush understood the importance of oil prices. So what we did, and this was an idea of two students of mine, is do this ultimate market efficiency test. Can we predict financial markets using oil prices? And the question was, will a change in oil price this month predict what the stock market will do in the next month? Again, a simple, very simple test. So what we did is we took stock market data, and the stock market data for 48 different countries. These had 18 developed markets at the time and 13 emerging markets, which are so called by some of these index creators. So we had Malaysia in this study as well. The data run from October 1973 to April 2003. And what we found was, oh, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Again, similar type of results. For almost every market, we found significant results. Here you see the results for the 18 developed markets. If oil prices go up in 1 month, stock markets have a tendency to go down in the next month. Malaysia is the one over here, and Malaysia, you see a similar effect, although not as strong. That may be because there is a huge industry in Malaysia that depends on the oil industry and oil, so that might be one reason. It could also be that in this study, for what is called the emerging markets, we have fewer data available, so an effect might not show up as significantly as in the longer series for the developed markets. So, but you see there is a sort of a negative relation. So these results, in more detail, what we found was a 10% oil shock for the world market will have an effect of about 0.8%. So if the market goes up, oil prices go up by 10%, and that is not extreme because commodity prices tend to fluctuate quite a lot. You can predict what the market will do on average in the next month a little bit better. So this is a delayed effect. Of course, you may say, but isn't there a contemporaneous effect, an immediate effect of oil price changes? Yes, there is. What we see is that forecastability is the strongest, so there's a couple of intuitions that we confirm. First of all, there is, if there is this gradual information diffusion, you wouldn't expect to be able to predict the oil industry, because that information will be immediately picked up. This is what we find in this study. The forecastability is strongest in the non-oil related sectors. Secondly, if oil prices increase, we see that immediately the market goes down. However, the stock markets of oil exporters go up and oil importers go down. So oil exporters benefit from an increase in oil prices. The delayed effects, the effect that we found in our study was that it is also bad for oil importers. If you look at Norway, you see that if oil prices go up, Norway profits immediately. However, in the next month, there's a delayed effect and oil prices will go down. The stock markets will go down also in Norway. So this is just to give you sort of a feel how research in academia is developing in terms of forecasting financial markets. I just give you a sample, predominantly my own work because I'm most familiar with that. And of course I like to talk best about my own work if you don't mind. But there is a lot of work going on in this area at this moment. And a lot of people in the industry are very much focused on what is going and happening here. However, this gradual information diffusion is relatively new. So, let me move on to this, the next link. Is there a positive relation between risk and expected return? And of course, if you think about it in theory, it makes sense that there should be. Why otherwise would you like to take risk if there's no reward? So in financial markets, what we assume is that there is a compensation for the time value of, first of all, there's a compensation for the time value of money, the interest rates. And if you invest risk-free, you only get the risk-free rates. However, if you take risk, you not only want compensation for the time value of money, you also want to be compensated for the risk you take. It is the excess return, or the risk premium. So, if you invest in a risky asset, you want to be compensated for it in the long run. This is what economic theory tells us. Now, if you think about this, then let me to show you the next graph. This makes intuitive sense. It doesn't need to be a linear relation, but it might be a linear relation. I'm going to look now just at the risk part. So I'll take out the possible risk-free rate. So what I'll do now is I'll simply look at the compensation for risk. Do we see this compensation for risk in financial markets? As I told you, we had a look at the all financial markets all over the world and all history available. So the good thing about that data set was that it allowed us to simply test whether, if we looked at different countries, whether there was this relationship between risk and return. In financial markets, we use the standard deviation and mean excess returns to try and measure this. And this is what you find if you look at all markets all the time for all data that we have. And the red arrow indicates where Malaysia is roughly in this plot. You see that if you look at all these different countries, the returns and risk in these different countries, and we tend to measure returns as a standard deviation. What you see is very little that points towards a positive relation between risk and return. The interesting thing is, of course, if you have another look at the Salome anomaly, what you see is during May through October, if anything, the relation is strongly negative. This very strongly negative relation is between risk and return during the summer periods. So not only are your returns negative, the more risky the country, the more stronger the effect tends to be. Now, this may not be a surprise given the earlier results, but if you think about the other period, we find a relationship when returns are actually positive. We find very little evidence. Again, it depends a little bit whether you want to consider some of the highly risk markets an outlier, yes or no, but I personally don't find this very convincing evidence of a risk-return relationship. Now, this was just looking at some of my own data. This absence of a risk-return relationship has been found in all sorts of places. We take it for granted that there should be this relationship. But if we start looking at all sorts of different risk measures that we can use to measure the risk of financial assets, and their returns over long periods of time, we fail to find this relationship. And a very good example is a book written by Eric Falkenstein. It's called The Missing Risk Premium. And the missing risk premium is that the reason is that it never shows up. And he looks at different assets and different risk measures. And what he finds is that if you look at all those measures, that no evidence of this risk-return relationship shows up. Interestingly, he gives a couple of examples of different risk measures which I give you here. Interestingly, there's now a follow-up study pretty recently that actually looks and see whether you could trade on this very simple Halloween strategy combining it with this strategy. And they find that it works. You can, if you trade low volatility stocks during summer and high volatility stocks during winter, then you're actually improving on the Halloween strategy and always invested in the market. This is a strategy that I have started implementing myself in my own trading portfolio this year. So relatively easy to do these days with index trackers, etc. So what is going on here? If we think about this question, this relationship between risk and return, the question that pops up is, are our risk measures wrong? Are we simply measuring risk in the wrong way? And I think that may be an important part of the puzzle, because I think that in academia we have a tendency to focus too much on things that we can actually measure. And maybe we should be moving more towards what Warren Buffett says is the actual risk of a financial company, which very much depends on management, etc., and try and make more of a risk measure out of that. So maybe our risk measures are wrong. Alternatively, and there's some evidence to suggest that these days, is that our measures of expectations are wrong. Think about expectations. It's very difficult to find out what expectations of investors are, because we can see how they actually trade, but we can't see what they expected. So what we do in academic research is we use sort of proxies for expectations. Very long-term history of stock market returns, for instance, as a sort of indicator what future returns may be. So it could very well be that we are measuring these expectations the wrong way. And last but not least, it could simply be that there is no relation between risk and return. That the theory is simply wrong. Now, this intuition is so ingrained in our thinking, at least if you take a lot of finance classes, that this is a pretty bold statement. But more and more people start thinking about financial markets. It could be in theory, let me put it differently. If relative wealth is important, then financial markets might be an instrument where you would be trading and try to improve on your peers, on your neighbors, sort of a neighbor effect. And if you think that this sounds silly, I have the following idea for you. So where to think why this somehow might make sense. In which country, think about in which country you would like to live. Suppose you choose country A, where everybody makes 200,000 and you make 120,000. Or suppose you live in country B, where everybody makes 90,000, but you make 110. Now, we did this experiment last week with some students in UPM, and the interesting thing was that almost all students said they would definitely prefer country B. And my guess would be that most of you would prefer so as well. And what makes this interesting is that in country B, you actually make less than you make in country A. You lose 10,000, still you prefer country B. And the reason is because you care about the relative wealth opposed to others. You somehow have the feeling that you might be better off in country B, even though you make on average less money. So this notion is now gaining more traction in the academic literature, and people are now open to this idea that this may play an important role. So let me now move on to the last foundation I would like to touch on today. So, when I started studying financial markets, it was really, if diversification was the thing. The modern portfolio theory won the Nobel Prize at that time, and diversification reduces risk. However, all my work had been in forecasting, but what happened was that in 2004, when laptops started being slightly more civilized, I decided to invest all my money in one stock. And as a finance professor at the time, in the early days I didn't dare tell my colleagues because I would think they would feel that I was insane. And so I kept quiet because theory was very strong. This was a Nobel Prize winning theory. This was a bad idea, according to the theory. At least that's what I thought. Because we learned that the benefits of diversification are huge. And I took this quote from the NASDAQ website. And the notion is that if you invest in more and more stocks, the benefits of diversification in terms of risk are tremendous. From 250, you can reduce your risk by 100 simply by investing in more and different stocks. Ultimately, there are no more gains to be had because this is the risk you can't get rid of. This is the risk you want compensation for in financial markets, the systematic risk. Now, this notion originated from the modern portfolio theory, and the next slide I'll show you is just for, if you have taken a finance course, this should look familiar to you. Because in a finance course, what we say is that if you diversify by investing in all these individual stocks, you can create an efficient market portfolio based on the expectations and returns of those stocks. And that is the optimal portfolio you should hold, and that portfolio is well diversified. And if you then choose between the risk-free rate, you have the best possible solution here. This idea one is basically don't put all your eggs in one basket, and is the foundation of diversification. and it won the Nobel Prize in 1952. Markowitz won the Nobel Prize. Sorry, the article appeared in 1952, they won the Nobel Prize in around the 1990s. So, if you look at the textbooks around those time, and this was my first textbook, it was very clear, you have to diversify. In fact, based on all these studies, if you look at US law, you'll see that in the US, you are required by law to diversify. Get rid of this risk. Now, the interesting thing is there are opposing views. So if you look at some of the views, this is the view of Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett says, invest in a small selection of stocks. And he actually does that with his portfolio. And basically, invest in the stocks that you really know something about and that you feel have potential. Now, I got intrigued because I wanted to sort of explain what was going on, so I started digging. And I looked at Markowitz's original article. And you don't need to read this, I just put it on for completeness from the presentation. But Markowitz actually acknowledges that there is a possibility that you can invest only in one asset, depending on your expectations. And but everyone seems to have forgotten about this. And not only Markowitz, but so there is this possibility. And the interesting thing, the quote by Mark Twain that I showed you about the seasonal investing is very often reported in the academic literature, in the academic studies, but this quote by Mark Twain you hardly ever see. Now, Mark Twain was not the best investor around, but it makes you think. And in fact, if you look at actual investment holdings of private investors, and these are Dutch private investors, the number of stocks they invested in different companies. So what you see here is how many investors, what percentage of all investors invest in the number of different stocks they hold. You see that most investors actually do invest in only one stock, and two maybe hold 50% of all investors invest in two stocks. And then there's a whole bunch of people that invest in more, but most people, even though theory tells them not to, don't diversify. But these are private investors. So I started wondering what is going on here. And I started thinking about these. So we did some research in this area. And what I would like you to think of these 4 different stocks. And I simply took these 4 different stocks from the CNN website. And what you see on the CNN website for these 4 arbitrary stocks, and you see this very often, is that they give the actual price, and then they give sort of a forecast based on analyst expectations for the next year. So what do analysts expect where these stocks might be going? And what you see is that these stocks, and it might be hard to see the numbers, but for all these stocks, the average expectations is pretty high. It can be up to easily above 20%. So expectations of 20%, if you look at analyst forecast, are not exceptional. So the question I would like to pose to you is, suppose that you compare yourself with a well-diversified benchmark. Suppose that you say, should I invest, this is my benchmark, here is where I want to compare my result with. Should I invest, and I expect this benchmark to go up to 10%. But here are 4 stocks that I have selected, and based on my analysis, I expect all those 4 stocks to go up by at least 20%. Now let's say these are average stocks, nothing special in terms of risk and return, in terms of their risk, so not risk and returns, but their risk and their covariance and co-movement with the market. But these are just basic stocks where you simply expect them to go up by 20%. If you believe in the modern portfolio theory, what should you do? Should you still diversify and put all in the benchmark because and ignore this information? Should you invest all in these 4 stocks? Should you invest mostly in the benchmark and maybe overweight these 4 different stocks, so part in 4 stocks? Or should you invest mostly in these 4 stocks and maybe a part in the benchmark to be diversified? Now, this was the question these type of questions I started wondering about. And this led to a paper called, that's still a working paper, but this is what we try to answer in that paper. And in this paper, something went wrong in the translation there. It should be stock picking versus diversification when benchmarks are inefficient. It doesn't pick the F's. And what we see, this is a joint work with Ufuk and Frans de Roon. And what we see is that the questions we ask in this paper is, does diversification still make sense? When people have expectations, say, well, based on past returns, and expectations of these past returns can be of a size of, say, historical returns, because we know that many investors use past returns to sort of get a feel for what future returns may be. So if we take a long-term history, let's say 5 or 10 years of history, what would you do if you take that as sort of approximation for the future? Or if you have expectations that are similar to, in size, to analyst forecasts, would you still diversify? Of course, if you believe that a benchmark can be ex-ante efficient, then there is no point, because then you will always hold this efficient benchmark. And so in theory, you can't outperform this benchmark. But unfortunately, we don't know what expectations are, and we don't know what future correlations and risk for these for variance efficient portfolio is. So in real life, we work with indices, stock market indices, as sort of benchmark portfolio. So what we see is we use indices in real life, and that is what we do as well. Now, I just want to quickly move over this because this is simply how we worked on this idea. It's very easy to solve. Any basic student can solve this problem if you know the problem you need to solve. It's just basic textbook work. And what we did is we took 2 assets, these 2 asset A, which is our individual stock, over the benchmark, and then calculate an optimal portfolio and ask ourselves, when would this portfolio be optimal in the market rate sense? When would it be optimal to invest more than 100% in the asset, only in the individual stock? And this is a very simple thing. It takes you an afternoon to work it out, mostly. But at least it took me an afternoon, it might take you much less time. But it took me an afternoon to work this out. And the result I ended up with is I like so much because it is basically very simple. The main result I find is that if the Sharpe ratio of the benchmark, and Sharpe ratio is nothing else than the reward to risk ratio. So if you expected return divided by the risk you take of the benchmark is smaller than the Sharpe ratio of your assets, which is nothing else than the risk return of the individual stock of the assets, times the correlation of the asset and the benchmark, so the co-movement between the two, then you would prefer to invest all your money in that one asset. So this very simple relationship, and you can think of it in terms of Sharpe ratio, but you can very much also think about it in terms of risk and return. If you have a certain benchmark in mind, and you're measured against a certain benchmark, and you have a certain expectation about the future risk-reward ratio, and you think about a portfolio of stocks you might be keen on investing in, and you have an expected return ratio in mind as well, with risk-return ratio in mind, whether you should invest fully in that portfolio of these few stocks depends on the correlation with your benchmark. Now, if that relationship holds, then you might be willing to invest in all your money in this portfolio. So if stock picking works, that can mean one of two things. Either that if this relationship holds, the stock picking works, that it might be worthwhile to invest in these stocks, or that benchmarks are tremendously inefficient. Now let's take a closer look. If you look at this relationship, what you'll see is that there's three different variables here. And we can plot this in space, in a three-dimensional space. And in this three-dimensional space, what is, you can sort of distinguish. If you here have the Sharpe ratio of the benchmark, here you have the Sharpe ratio of the assets. And depending on the correlation between the asset and the benchmark, you end up somewhere in this three-dimensional space. And if you look at the different characteristics of these stocks, if you're in this space, this is what I call the stock picking space. If there are stocks in this space, then you would prefer to hold those stocks over the benchmark, meaning that you wouldn't invest in the benchmark at all. So what we did in theory, we showed that this space at least existed. The important question now was to see that if people have these type of expectations based on past returns or based on analyst expectations, we would actually find stocks living in this space. And that was the next step in our analysis. So what we did is we looked at these historical data for the US market and all the data a lot of data we could get our hands on. And we decided to go with 5-year returns initially. So we assumed that investors, when they looked at stocks, individual stocks, and they would look at future stock market returns from their expectations about the future, they simply would extrapolate the next 5 years. And the same thing for the stock market. They would look at the broader market index and extrapolate this for the next 5 years. And in fact, that is what a lot of people seem to do. And what we found surprised us. We found that if you do that, based on the correlations, based on the standard deviations, we found evidence that 30% of all stocks in the US markets on average live in that space. This is huge. This means that for 30% of all stocks, you can't reject the idea that you're better off investing in this stock than in the benchmark at any given point in time. Then we took analyst expectations. There are databases of analyst expectations available. And what we did is that we started looking at those analyst expectations, and what we find is that if you have those type of expectations and based on past returns, past standard deviations and past correlations, we find there are a tremendous amount of stocks living in that space. Individual stocks, mind you, 40% of all the time, individual stocks live in that space. And we would actually plot that in this three-dimensional plot. And this took quite a bit of time to create. It's probably the closest thing I will get to modern art